You got one clap. All right, if you'll open your Bibles tonight to Judges 9. A couple weeks ago, I had given you a sheet with all the books, all the list of the books of the Bible. I hope you guys are taking advantage of that. And just sort of, for you guys that know it well, that's just kind of another little study guide. But for you that have not taken the time, I'm telling you, it helps you tremendously if you know the order of the books in the Bible. Something simple you can do. You can do it sitting in your office, sitting at the couch, whatever. But it's just a great thing to know. You need to know your word. We said a long time ago when we first started this church that the reason we do Wednesday night Bible studies like that is because we realized that the church was so very weak in the Word of God. They didn't know what the Word of God says. And if you do not know what the Word of God says, then you can be easily deceived. Somebody can come in and say, hey, the Word says this and this and this, and you go, oh, yeah, okay, not knowing that you're being deceived because you don't know the Word. So that's why we break it down every week, line by line. So once again, if anybody needs a sheet, if you need a sheet, raise your hand. If you need a Bible, got a cup up here, Tommy. If you need a Bible, just raise both hands. All right, so we're in Judges 9. Let's just quickly review. As we read in chapter 8, Gideon has fallen into a pretty terrible place in his walk with God. The Lord had led him to victory over the Midianites, but he had become bitter towards his countrymen, especially the sons of Ephraim, that area. They were always constant rivals. He had become bitter towards them and his countrymen and prideful about his accomplishments. At the end of 8, you remember that they had asked him to be king. The children of Israel said, please be king. He said, no, I'm not going to be king. My son's not going to be king. And my grandson is not going to be king. He said, but you can do me one favor. I need your earrings, the gold earrings that you got as plunder. And so they laid out a big blanket and everybody came. And the thing that he did with them is where it began, because he took all those earrings, all that gold, melted it down, and he made an ephod, which is a priestly garment, which you're not supposed to do if you're not a priest. And he hung it in his hometown kind of like hey, look what we did. This is what we did. This is what I did, when I defeated the Midianites. He also, even though he says he would not serve as king, he really did see himself as king. He went and did all the things that a king would do. He had a harlem. He had enough wives that he had 70 sons. And then he had concubines. And the last one that they talked about was a concubine in Shechem, and his name is Abimelech, which means my father is king. So although he said at first he wasn't going to be king, he clearly ruled in that manner. So after Gideon died, the Israelites once fell again into the serious idolatry, and they started worshiping Baal-berith. And although Gideon has died, his legacies, his sons are still alive. So last week was the last of Gideon, but we're going to hear one more account of one of Gideon's sons, Abimelech. And it's not a good account. Verse 1. Then Abimelech, the son of Jerubbaal, that's Gideon's nickname, went to Shechem, to his mother's brothers, and spoke with them and with all the family of the house of his mother's father, saying, please speak in the hearing of all the men of Shechem. Speak this, is what he's saying. Which is better for you, that all 70 of the sons of Jerubbaal reign over you, or that one reign over you? Remember, I am your own flesh and blood. So even after Gideon's death, even though he said he wasn't king, his son still had the authority, and it was recognized in Israel, except for Abimelech. And the reason he wasn't was because his mother was a slave or a concubine, and they had no authority in the family because she wasn't a true wife. And he didn't like that. He was jealous about it. He's thinking, I'm as much a son as they are. And so he has gone back to his mother's family in Shechem, and ask them, say, hey, look, go before the men of Shechem and ask them, hey, which would had you rather have? You rather have 70 of the sons of Gideon rule over you, or had you rather have me? I'm a blood brother. I'll do what's right for you. Which one did you ever have? Will you do that? Will you go before the town council, so to speak, and make a bid for that? Verse 3. Excuse me. And his mother's brothers spoke all these words concerning him in the hearing of the men of Shechem. And their heart was inclined to follow Abimelech, for they said, he is our brother. So they gave him 70 shekels of silver from the temple of Baal-Berith, with which Abimelech hired worthless and reckless men, basically mercenaries, and they followed him. Then he went in his father's house at Ophrah and killed his brothers, the 70 sons of Jerubbaal, on one stone. But Jotham, the youngest son of Jerubbaal, was left because he hid himself. So he goes and he goes for his brothers or his mother's brothers and say, hey, go before the council, see if they will let me be king. And they say, yeah, since he's blood, that's going to benefit us. We'll absolutely do it. So then they go and they get money from their pagan god. In this time period, a lot of religions, even the Jews, their temples would be their banks. That's where they would have their money. That was where the most guards were, and that was a safe place that they could keep their money in. That's true of this. So they go and they get some money, and they give it to Abimelech, and he goes and hires these just horrible, ruthless guys that go back to his hometown and kill one by one on one stone all 70 of the brothers, except for the last one, Jotham. He must have been small enough or young enough that he hid and they couldn't find him. Verse 6, and all the men of Shechem gathered together, all of Baal-Millo, and they went and made Amalek king beside the terebinth tree at the pillar that was in Shechem. We've talked a lot about Shechem, so let me just paint a quick picture of what it looks like. Shechem is down at the bottom of a valley. There's two big mountains. We've heard back in Joshua where there were two mountains. One was Ebal and one was Gerizim. That's what it was. And they shouted back and forth. One shouted the blessings, the other shouted from the other mountain the curses. If you remember that, go back and read on that. Shechem's down in this valley, and there was a big terebinth tree, which terebinth trees are just incredible trees. They can be 50 to 70 feet high. They're huge trees, but they can live close to 1,000 years. So this one terebinth tree has been the center of town, so to speak, their town hall, so to speak, for all these years. And so now they're all gathered there, and they're going to crown him king at this terebinth tree. Terebinth tree, by the way, which I just thought was kind of cool, is also a pistachio tree. So they could eat while they're there. Ironically, Amalek's coronation, where he was crowned, is the same tree, because remember I said they could live like 1,000 years, took place at the same tree where Joshua had solemnly placed a copy of the law in Joshua 24, if you remember that. I mean, the law was right there. It's a copy there, and yet they didn't read it. Verse 7. Now, when they told Jotham, he went and stood on top of Mount Gerizim. Remember, there's two mounts, Ebal and Gerizim, and then there's Shechem's down here in the valley. Now, when they told Jotham, he went up and stood at the top of Mount Gerizim and lifted his voice and cried out. And he said to them, the next several verses are a parable that he's going to give, but really he is prophesying the fate of the men of Shechem and of Abimelech. I'm having a hard time saying that tonight. Abimelech. I'm thinking of the coach, so I keep going back to that. I shouldn't even said that. Anyway, we're going to call him Ab. Verse 7. Let's go back to that. Now, when they told Jotham, he went and stood on top of Mount Gerizim and lifted his voice and cried out. And he said to them, listen to me, you men of Shechem, that God may listen to you. This is the parable he's saying. The trees once went forth to anoint a king over them. And they said to the olive tree, reign over us. But the olive tree said to them, should I cease giving my oil with which they honor God and men and go and sway over trees? Verse 10, then the trees said to the fig tree, you come and reign over us. But the fig tree said to them, should I cease my sweetness and my good fruit and go to sway over trees? Then the tree said to the vine, you come and reign over us. But the vine said to them, should I cease my new wine, which cheers both God and men, and go sway over trees? Then all the trees said to the bramble, you come and reign over us. And the bramble said to the trees, if in truth you anoint me as king over you, then come and take shelter in my shade. But if not, let fire come out of the bramble and devour the cedars of Lebanon. So he's given them a parable. Remember now, Amalek has gone and he's joined up with the men of Shechem. They went, yeah, we want him. We're going to crown him king and all that. And Jotham is saying, this is not a good idea. And so he gives this parable. The first part of it, he is talking about the 3 different fruit trees. Those are the good ones. Each fruit tree is the ones that are bearing fruit. The olive tree, the fig tree, and the vine. And the trees, which are the trees of Lebanon, which represent Israel, are asked in these 3 men, these 3 fruit trees, which I'm assuming it's Gideon's son, and maybe Gideon's grandson, because they had asked it first, will you be king? And he went, not me, not my son, or my grandson. And so he's asking, these trees are saying, hey, will you good fruits trees do it? And they went, absolutely not. So then, in desperation, they finally go to this bramble. If you remember, we talked a couple of weeks ago that Shechem was full of these thorns. They're called bramble trees. They're really not even trees. They're like little thorn trees, little thorn bushes. And they are so painful. In fact, we talked about the fact that some of the men had gone and chopped down those trees, dropped down those bushes that had the long sticks that'll just, if you run into them, kind of like a briar patch, but, to the 4th power. They would just sting into you, but they would take them and they would cut them, and then they would lay somebody they want to torture down on them, and then they would step on them or pull a wagon over. It was just a horrible thing, but that's what Shechem is known for. In fact, that is one of the meanings of Shechem is brambles. So they're these little bitty trees. So it says finally, if they ask the fruit trees, will you serve? Will you be king? They said, no, he comes to the bramble. Now, although a bramble is very pretty, it's a pretty flower, but it bears no fruit. Its wood is no good for construction, and it's not large enough to provide shade. And actually, it's a harm because a lot of the shepherds would come in and their sheep would go in and they would get tangled up, and it was just really painful to get them to come out. You would have to just basically pull them out and scrape them up. The last part of it is the part that the bramble tree or the bramble bush said, yeah, I'll be king. He said, but, remember he's prophesied, let fire come out of the brambles and devour the cedars of Lebanon, that's Israel, if you don't obey me. And so he's going ahead, and Jotham is saying, look, this is not going to turn out well for you. Because if you follow him, if you follow Abimelech, and you do good, he'll protect you and he'll watch over you. But if anything ever comes up, he'll totally destroy you because he has no character. You think about it. You can judge a person's character a lot of times by how they react. If somebody does you wrong and you go in and you go for the jugular, boy, you come back and you take revenge, you talk about them, you do everything you can to destroy you, then maybe you don't have good character. And this is a big thing. In fact, let me read real quick. See if I can find it. You know what? Let's don't read it. Let's just move on. So the condensed moral of this story is weak, worthless, and wicked men will ever be foremost to thrust themselves into power and in the end to bring ruin upon themselves and on the unhappy people who they are overtaken. And this is what he's saying to them. He's going, this is not going to work well for you. You have an ungodly leader and you're an ungodly people, and this is not going to work out well for you. 16. Now therefore, he's still talking. If you have acted in truth and sincerity in making Abimelech king, and if you have dealt well with Jerubbaal, it's Gideon, and his house, and have done to him as he deserves, for my father fought for you, risked his life, and delivered you out of the hand of Midian, but you have risen up against my father's house this day and killed his 70 sons on one stone, and made Abimelech the sons of his female servant king of the men of Shechem, because he is your brother. Verse 19. If then you have acted in truth and sincerity with Jerubbaal and with his house this day, then rejoice in Abimelech, and let him also rejoice in you. But if not, let fire come from Abimelech and devour the men of Shechem and Beth Millo. This is another group of people that live right outside of them that are helping them. And let fire come from the men of Shechem from Ben Millo. And sounds like I'm saying Ben Malo, doesn't it? We know what. Beth Millo, and devour Amalek. And Jonathan ran away and fled. He went to Beer and dwelt there for fear of Amalek and his brothers. So he finishes his story by saying, if you've just given Gideon's family what they deserve, by killing them, and you've been truthful and had integrity in making Abimelech the king, then you should be happy. But if you killed my brother simply because Abimelech is your relative, which he was, then may you and Amalek destroy each other by fire. And then he runs and hides because he's up on a hill. All they have to do is run and get him. So he's basically saying, if you did this sincerely because you think he's the best king, then great. But if you didn't, if you just made him king just because he's your brother and you think he's going to benefit, then you're both going to destroy each other, which is exactly what happens. Verse 22. After Amalek had reigned over Israel 3 years, God sent a spirit of ill will between Amalek and the men of Shechem. And the men of Shechem dealt treacherously with Abimelech. Verse 24, that the crime done to the 70 sons of Jerubbaal might be settled, and their blood be laid on Amalek and their brother who killed them, and on the men of Shechem who aided him in the killing of the brothers. So what happened? What happened is, why was this ill spirit let loose or released? Actually, it says up here, where it says sent, actually, if you look the word up, it actually means released or let loose, because God does not have down in his basements a bunch of demons that he lets loose. He doesn't have. But what you have to understand is you will reap what you sow, and God in the Old Testament especially has judgment. If you do something wrong in the Old Testament, then he has to, by his word, deliver judgment. And that's what's going forth here, is because they had come. Gideon was a judge. He was anointed by God to do something. And these men and the son had come back and killed all the brothers. He would have killed all of them if the youngest one had not escaped. They had done something horrible to a man of God that had delivered them from the Midianites. They hadn't done what's right. And so he's going, you're going to reap what you sow. When they had killed Gideon's sons, they had sowed seeds of violence and treachery. Now, 3 years later, that crop has grown up to haunt them. You know, I was thinking when I was reading this, the things you do today will predict how the rest of your life turns out. You can ask for forgiveness, but I'm telling you, there are laws that are put into place that God does not change. And the one of them is you will reap what you sow. Now, can you be forgiven? Absolutely. Can you have all your sins totally wiped away? Absolutely. But understand that there will still be repercussions of your actions. You know, somebody that kills somebody, they may go before the Lord and say, I'm sorry, I'm saved, I believe you, please forgive me of all my sins. And the Lord says, fine, you are totally free. You have nothing holding you back, but you're still going to have to go to jail because of the system. So you reap what you sow. So the things that you do today, and don't take it as a negative. There are positive things that you do. If you treat your parents right, if you respect your friends, if you do those things, those are the same kind of things that if you sow into that, if you sow into the goodness of God, if you sow into good things, you will reap them. So it goes both ways. Don't see it as just a negative. But that's really the moral of this whole entire story, is what you reap. It's talking to Amalek. I wish I'd never said that now. That's all I can see as a coach. If the son, Amalek, somebody say it. Amalek. Amalek, Amalek, Amalek. Amalek, Amalek. Abimelech, Abimelech. There you go, Abimelech. Verse 25. Yeah, y'all get up here and try to pronounce all these names. I'll call you up. 25. And the men of Shechem set men in the ambush against him on the tops of the mountains, and they robbed all who passed by them along the way, and it was told of Amalek. So now the spirit has been let loose, so to speak. They're about to reap what they sow. So now these two groups, Amalek and the men of Shechem, now which were getting along so well, it was their brother. Now they're going to clash. And what's happened is these men of Shechem now, they're upset with him. And so they set up on the road. He had there was a big road that came through, and a lot of trade come through there. But they would come back on the back of the mountains and stand on the mountains, and when the people coming through were coming into their city in order to trade and stuff like that, and they would attack them and they would rob them. So eventually people just said, I'm not going that way, and it hurt Amalek's trade route. Verse 26. So the feuding has begun. Verse 26. Now Gaal, the son of Ebed, came with his brothers and went over to Shechem. And the men of Shechem put their confidence in him. So here's a new guy that has come into this situation or into the story. He's come into this mess more than anything. And he must have been a really charismatic guy, because as soon as he comes in with his brothers into Shechem, all the men of Shechem say, oh, we like him. Maybe he could be our king. That quick. Appointing newcomers to positions of authority or leadership is always a danger. You can know for sure in this church, before we ever put anybody into authority, we know their character. It's not something that is just quick. We research, we see their spirit, we check our spirit. That's how it's done. In fact, 1 Timothy 5:22 says, I think I have that slide up there. Do y'all have it? 1 Timothy 5:22, I'll just read it, don't worry about it. Do not lay hands upon anyone too hastily, and thus share responsibility for the sins of others. Keep yourself free from sin. The second one is 1 Timothy 3:10. And let these also first be tested, and then let them serve as deacons if they are beyond a reproach. So you don't just throw people in, gosh, I see it so many times. So many places, so many churches, so many establishments get in trouble because they let anybody walk in the door on the third time they visit and say, oh yeah, you want to lead praise and worship? And you just cannot do that. That is a holy thing. You just have to be very careful. Take your time, get to know the character, and then you won't run into those mistakes. Verse 27. So they went out into the fields, and they gathered grapes from their vineyards and trod them and made merry. This is the men of Shechem. And they went into the house of their God, and they ate and drank and cursed Amalek. Then Gaal, the son of Ebed, said, who is Amalek and who is Shechem, that he should serve him? Is he not the son of Jerubbaal, and is not Zebul his officer? Zebul was sort of the mayor of the town, and he was Abimelech's head guy. He was his lieutenant. Verse 28 again. Then Gaal, the son of Ebed, said, who is Abimelech and who is Shechem, that we should serve him? Is he not the son of Jerubbaal, and is not Zebul his officer? Serve the men of Hamor, the father of Shechem, but why should we serve him? If only his people were under my authority, this is Gaal talking, the new guy, then I would remove Amalek. And he said to Amalek, and so he said to Amalek, increase your army and come out. So here they are, all the men, they had gone out, gathered the grapes, come in, and they had a party, and they started getting drunk. And when you start drinking, your lips, the things you say come out, really, the intentions of your heart come out. You become invisible, you say whatever, and so this guy's really getting haughty now. And he's going, hey, who is Amalek? That he should rule over these people. I should rule over. And then he kind of in a gesture says, tell him to come on, tell him to bring his forces. Well, what he doesn't realize is the lieutenant is there, and he's hearing every single word that has been said. Verse 30. When Zebul, this is the lieutenant, the ruler of the city, heard the words of Gaal, we're going to call it Gaal, the son of Ebed, his anger was aroused. And he sent messengers to Amalek, secretly saying, take note, Gaal, the son of Ebed, and his brothers have come to Shechem, and here they are fortifying the city against you. Now therefore, get up by night, you and the people who are with you, and lie in wait in the field. And it shall be, as soon as the sun is up in the morning, that you shall rise early and rush upon the city. And when he and the people who are with him come out against you, you may then do to them as you find opportunity. So Amalek and all the people who were with him rose by night and laid wait against Shechem in 4 companies. So Zebul was not thrilled about what Gaal was saying. And so he sent messenger to Amalek and said, Abimelech, whatever his name, and it said, hey, this guy is planning, he has his brothers with him, and he's planning to come against you and take you. He wants to take you. And he said, so what I suggest you do is go get your forces, come in here, and let's nip this in the bud now, before it gets out of hand. So he goes and he gets, Amalek goes and gets his group, his army, and they're hiding up in the mountains. Remember, it's 2 mountains, Shechem's down here. And so they're hiding out there, and they're waiting until morning. Verse 35, when Gaal, the son of Ebed, went out and stood in the entrance of the city gate, Amalek, Abimelech, whoever, and the people who were with him rose from lying in wait. And when Gaal saw the people, he said to Zebul, and now he's come out to the front of the city. That's where all the businesses is. That's where the leaders are. And he comes out and he looks at the mountain. He goes, "This looks like people." Verse 36. And when Gaal saw the people, he said to Zebul, "Look, people coming down from the tops of the mountains." But Zebul said to him, "You see the shadows of the mountains as if they were men." In other words, you're seeing things. It just looks like the trees are blowing. It looks like men. 37. So Gaal spoke again and said, "See, people are coming down from the center of the land, and another company is coming from the diviner's terebinth tree." Then Zebul said to him, "Where indeed is your mouth now with which you said, 'Who is Amalek, that we should serve him? Are these not the people whom you despise? Go out, if you will, and fight them now.'" He's called his bluff. He goes out there and he looks and he goes, "Gosh, are those people come down out of the hills?" And then Zebul says, "No, I mean, it is trees." And then he went, "Oh, no, they're people." And so he starts to see them. And so, Gaal's going, "What's going on?" And Zebul says, "Look, you ran your mouth. This is exactly what you want. You got to protect that mouth, man." And I'm telling you, these are the kinds of things that happen when you drink. When you drink, you say things that you never intend to say. Never. Just stay away. Just stay away from it and have your yeses be yeses and your noes be noes, and you don't have to worry about it. 39. So Gaal went out, leading the men of Shechem, and fought with Amalek. And Amalek chased him, and he fled from him, and many fell wounded to the very entrance of the gate. Then Amalek dwelt at Arumah, and Zebul drove out Gaal and his brothers so they would not dwell in Shechem. So Gaal takes his brothers, and some of the men from Shechem comes out, fights them. A lot of people are killed right there at the gate, and then his lieutenant comes in and chases them off. Doesn't kill them, but chases them off. Verse 42. And it came about on the next day that the people of Shechem, went out in the field, and they told Amalek. So he took his people, divided them in 3 companies, and laid in wait in the field. And he looked, and there were the people coming out of the city, and he rose against them and attacked them. Then Amalek and the company that was with him rushed forward and stood at the entrance of the gate of the city. And the other 2 companies rushed upon all who were in the fields and killed them. So Abimelech fought against the city all that day. He took the city and killed the people who were in it, and he demolished the city and sold it with salt. So he goes in, he sees now, he's back up in the woods, come back, and people say, "Look, they're still talking. But they're going to come out and they're going to farm their land." And so Amalek says, "Okay, I'm going to wait till they come out and then we'll attack them." Now, these are the guys that were in cahoots with Gaal. But they think everything's okay because they took off Gaal and didn't mess with them, and so they're on with their daily life. But Amalek's saying, "Oh, no, you come against my kingdom, it's over, you're dead." And so he fights them, and they do it. Verse 42. And it came about on the next day that the people went out into the field, and told Amalek. So he took his people, divided in 3 companies, and laid wait in the field. And he looked, and there were the people coming out of the city, and he rose against them and attacked them. Then Amalek and the company that was in him rushed forward and stood at the entrance of the gate, and the other 2, and I just read this whole thing again. This is what just happened. But verse 45, what I do want to get over, it says, he took the city, killed the people who were in it, and he demolished the city and sold it with salt. What they used to do would take salt, and if you put salt on vegetation, it kills it forever. It kills the vegetation, it puts the acid, it messes with the acid in the ground, and so you can never farm that land again. A great example is the Dead Sea. If you've ever seen the Dead Sea over in Israel, there is nothing for miles. If there is salt, it's dead. You can see the bottom of the Dead Sea. There's no green. There are no trees. There are no animals. There are no fish. It just salt totally annihilates everything. And so he was punishing that city, and he was saying, look, he was telling the rest of the cities that were around him, look, this is what happened if you come against me. Psalms 107:33 says, just in reference to what salt does. He changes rivers into a wilderness and springs of water into a thirsty ground, a fruitful land into a salt waste because of the wickedness of those who dwell it. That's exactly what he did. Verse 46. Now when all the men of the tower of Shechem had heard that, they entered the stronghold of the temple and of the god Berith, And it was told Amalek that all the men of the tower of Shechem were gathered together. Then Amalek went up to the Mount Zalmon, he and all the people who were with him. And Amalek took an axe in his hand and cut down a bough from the trees and took it and laid it on his shoulder. Then he said to the people who were with him, what you have seen me do also. 49. So each of the people likewise cut down their own trees and followed Amalek, put them against the stronghold, and set the stronghold on fire above them, so that all the people of Shechem died, about 1,000 men and women. So they basically, what they did, all the people that were left retreated back into their temple, thought they were safe, but he went and just cut down some trees, put them at the foot or the door frame of the temple and set it on fire, and it killed them all. Verse 50. We're making a point with this. I know it's a lot, and I know it's a lot in one chapter, but this will come full circle. Verse 50. Then Amalek went to Tabates, and he encamped against Tabates and took it. This is another one of the cities that had joined in with Shechem to come against him. 51. But there was a strong tower in the city, and all the men and the women, all the people of the city fled there and shut themselves in. Then they went up to the top of the tower. So Amalek came as far as the tower and fought against it, and he drew near the door of the tower to burn it with fire. But a certain woman dropped an upper millstone on Amalek's head and crushed his skull. Then he called quickly to the young man, his armor bearer, and said to him, "Draw your sword and kill me, lest men say of me, a woman killed me." So his young man thrust him through, and he died. So he goes and he goes and he attacks this one last city that has helped Shechem. He goes to burn it down. They have a huge tower. And he goes to the front. They're burning it down. And a lady just takes a millstone. A millstone was like this big old piece of, it wouldn't be cement, but it's like cement with a hole in it. And she just threw it on him, and which was part of their defense, threw it on him and crushed his head. But it didn't kill him. And rather than be killed by a woman, he had his armor bearer come and kill him. Go figure. 55. And when the men of Israel saw that Amalek was dead, they departed every man to his place. 56. This is what this whole chapter has been about. This is the round circle of it. Thus God repaid the wickedness of Amalek, which he had done to his father by killing his 70 brothers. And all the evil of the men of Shechem God returned on their own heads, and on them came the curse of Jotham, the son of Jerubbaal. So everything that Jotham had said, had prophesied, had come true. They had reaped exactly what they had sowed. That's the gist of all of that. I'll be honest with you, a lot of these cities and stuff that's through here is also general information for other chapters you're going to read. It kind of gives you a lot of these chapters will map out cities that you can kind of see in your head as you're reading, and it makes a lot more sense. But the part that really needs to sink down is you will reap what you sow. Be careful. Be careful what comes out of your mouth. Be careful how you treat people. Be careful what you do. Sow good stuff. You sow good stuff, and it'll come back to you. Be nice to people. It's kind of like pay it forward. Bless people. Speak positive in people's life, and it'll come back to you. If your kids treat your parents with respect, then when your kids are growing up, when your own kids will grow up, they'll teach you with respect. It's, all of these things you have to understand. I love to think about it. Sometimes it's just lifts up my faith level. When I think about it, there are laws and practices like gravity, like the law of push and pull, and all those things that God himself has set into place. Science takes it, but God has set this into place that nobody can change. And they're all the same. Reaping and sowing is one of those laws. And I go, yeah, that's my God. He has all that set up. So again, watch your mouth. Watch what you do. Reap the good stuff. Reap the good stuff. Amen? All right, let's do our questions real quick. Again, if you have missed a day, missed some questions, we have all the answer sheets out on the board outside, information board. Number 1, what was Gideon's nickname? I like Gideon a lot better. Number 2, which son of Gideon decided to take